Good evening, everyone. Okay, so we have quite a few updates, and then we'll just have general discussion. Yeah, feel free to put questions in the chat until Mo gets here. I don't know if Blair is on also.
Yes, I've got it. I'm keeping track.
Wonderful. Okay, super. So Blair can actually moderate right now. Super. So we'll go through some of our updates and then we'll just have Q&A. Happy to answer any questions. So our first announcement is our 1855 number, which has actually been up for a while, but we're formally announcing it. And Lauren, do you want to go explain the 1-800 number, the 1855 number?
Yes, actually, Cynthia, why don't I let you do that since
Oh,
I'm going to take care of a
are you
couple
still putting,
messages.
she's still putting fires out. You
Okay.
bet. So the 1855 number, if you call the number, you press 1, you can go straight to fund recovery, which is a totally separate entity from AFTT, and they will help you get connected to therapy resources. So if you have insurance, they'll help walk you through that process, figure out if your insurance covers therapy. If you need therapy scholarship, they will help you with that. So they'll just do intake and work through it with you. That way, if you are not ready to report your PERP, you don't even have to talk to us to get therapy. I mean, we're still happy to refer if you're not ready to report your PERP. But if you don't want to talk to us at all, you can press 1 and you go straight to fund recovery. And we understand people are already using that feature. So when you call, press 1 to go straight to fund recovery. 2 comes to me, comes to the hotline phone, so you'll come straight to me. And then 3 gets you connected to Worldwide Survivor Care. That goes to Lauren. So if you're in need of some type of communal care, an advocate, any of those types of things, somebody's not muted.
Oh, Cynthia, you're muted.
I don't know how that happened. Did you hear me talk about Worldwide Survivor Care?
For a minute, I believe. Yes.
Okay.
All good.
Good. Does anybody have any questions about that? Are there any questions about that in the chat? We good? Okay,
Yeah,
and you
we're
can
good.
ask
No
questions. Okay, you can ask questions later if you want. So and just to reiterate, Fund Recovery and Little Hooves, they're the folks that do the equine therapy camps, which have been pretty amazing for our survivors. They are third parties. We are not affiliated with them. And so any work you do with them, we don't know about it. They don't share chart notes or any information with us about your case. So I don't know if anybody's pays attention, but we've been working on updating our website. So it's in process. Lots of changes still being made. And we're announcing our book club. So that is on the website. There's a book club tab. Our first book club pick is Predators by Ann Salter, and Denise is going to be our featured guest. So the book club's open right now for folks to be devouring the book Predators. And then we have a Zoom scheduled with Denise so she can present on the book and have a general discussion about the book. Do you remember the date of that, Denise? Or Lauren or anybody?
It's July 9th, July 16th.
Yes, July 16th.
July 16th. Okay. So book club, also we have engaged with Dr. Diane Langberg. For folks here who are familiar with her work, she's a Christian trauma therapist. And so she is going to be working with us to do some presentations. We don't have dates for the first event yet, but I think the first event will probably be a viewing party where you can watch on your own time. One of her videos, she's going to pick one of her YouTube videos that's already online, and then we will host an event where she will present and answer any questions specific to the 2x2 community for us. So we're hoping to address some of the betrayal, trauma, and those types of subjects that she's an expert in. Also the advocates program. I think Lauren, if you're not still putting out a flyer, or actually Dr. Bolin, to give an overview of, or Donna, whoever, an overview of the curriculum and training program.
So we have had Janet Morton, who is amazing, has helped us develop a very robust 40-hour advocate training program. It's an online training program for those that want to become trained advocates, to volunteer with us. And we just went through our first pilot. We ended that in June, and we are going to start another cohort sometime in August. So for those of you that might be interested and want to volunteer and go through our advocacy program, on our website, at the very top, it'll say get involved. And then the tab, there's a volunteer opportunity tab. And so that is the way to contact us if you're interested. I don't think the submission form has been uploaded yet for those that want to be trained advocates, but it will soon. So just look for that, and that's how you can sign up for our upcoming advocacy program. I can go into the next one too, Cynthia, about call for a therapist. So if you are a therapist, or you know a therapist that would be interested in volunteering with us, we are looking for additional support. We want to emphasize that it's not therapists that will engage in treatment or assessment. It's solely just for consultation and support. And it doesn't have to be a therapist that is from the church. We definitely want therapists that are trauma informed. That is a must. And if you know therapists that are trained in religious trauma, that would also be great too, but not necessary. So if you or you know of someone, a therapist that would want to volunteer with us, please let us know. Reach out. You can reach out directly to me. I'll put my email in the chat, and we would love to talk.
Okay, Lauren, are you still putting fires out?
No, I can chat.
Okay, people are still having trouble getting in.
Oh, okay. Well,
I don't know why.
I'm
but
sure.
okay. So yes, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about Denver. We have our Denver fundraiser coming up, which is a dinner that's donated by a restaurant. The owner and the chef donates all of the food for this dinner. And Fund Recovery has graciously basically given us this fundraiser to raise funds for AFTT and our survivors. So
Yeah, and there will be several athletes there from former Denver Broncos players. It's a steak dinner. You can, if you'd like to buy a ticket, you can. You can also buy a table. If you'd like to donate an item for the silent auction, that's also an option. If you are a survivor that would like to attend, please let us know. There's lots of different options. So please reach out, tell your friends if you happen to be in the Colorado region. And hey, invite an overseer too. You never know, right? Who might show up. Anyways, Sorry, dark joke. It's been a long year already. And so we will, yeah, so please let us know. We'll put this also in the chat, the information on this dinner, and all of the proceeds are going to go to Advocates for the Truth, and then we will disperse from there as needed. So if you have any interest in sponsoring the event and attending the event and donating to the silent auction, please let us know. We'd love to have you and have a steak and potato meal with you.
Thanks for taking that over. My computer wanted to update right then. Started to do an update. Having a fun day of technical difficulties. Speaking of the fundraiser and the funds going to AFTT, I wanted to address some rumors that are going around out there. One of them is that Cynthia is replenishing her income with donations made to AFTT. And I want to let you know exactly what I get from AFTT. Last year, a donor generously offered to pay us $1,000 a month to be split 3 ways. So I get a check every month for $333. And then I also get reimbursed for my hard costs, database costs, court records, that type of thing. So that's what I get from AFTT. If you want to clear that rumor up, if you hear it. And what was the other one? Oh, that I sold the story to Hulu and or ABC. That's not a thing. ABC doesn't do that. So I wasn't in the documentary. So that's another one you can clear up if you hear it. Or a current fundraiser. Who wants to take that one?
Dr. Bullen, I think you want to take that one. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I can take that one. So we have kicked off our fundraiser and donor. We highlighted May as Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we were really pushing the fundraiser just to bring awareness to mental health services, the cost to mental health services. And we're going to continue to keep our fundraiser open for the rest of the year. So it'll be a year-long fundraiser. We'll highlight each month as it comes up in different topics. In addition to our fundraiser and our donor, we're also writing grants. So I think we talked about this at our last town hall. We applied for 2 grants under the Department of Justice, and that is to help pay for legal services and the legal process. If awarded, one grant was $900,000 and the second grant under the DOJ was $400,000. And we'll know about those 2 grant awards in October. And then last month, we applied for a 3rd grant under the National Center for Victims of Crime. And that is a $100,000 grant to pay for peer-to-peer support for our survivors. And so if awarded, that will go towards our advocacy program. And in addition, we continue to look for grants. And so if you come across any grant opportunities that you want to share with us, please reach out by email. They come out at different times, and it takes a whole community because there's not just one website that you learn about grants. So research is definitely needed. So we'll continue to apply for grants as they come up, just to diversify our revenue stream under Advocates for the Truth. And we hope to announce awards soon.
Cynthia, you're muted.
It's that kind of day. Dr. Bullen, do you want to talk about how grants have to be used for a very specific purpose?
Yes. So these grants that we applied for, they're federal grants, and it's very strict monitoring. We have to show outcomes and data. We will be bringing on, if awarded these grants, we will be bringing on additional employees under the umbrella of Advocates to help monitor our grant, to for data reporting, and then also to do this direct services. So these grants are service related grants. And so if we're awarded the DOJ grants, then we'll be really enhancing the legal side, investigation, working with attorneys, really building out that branch of advocates for the truth. And then as we start writing grants more towards the advocacy side, we will be bringing on more paid positions under the advocate side. And that's growing out a nonprofit. And so as more grants come on, then it gives us the ability to then bring on more of those paid positions and sustain the nonprofits for many years to come. Most grants are time limited. So the DOJ grant is a 4-year grant, and then the National Center for Victim of Crime, I think it's a 3-year grant, but I don't remember off the top of my head, but usually they're about 3 to 5 years.
I'd just like to go back to a couple of things, since some fires are put out, some are not. Let's return to who Dr. Diane Langberg is. And I think, Donna, would you go ahead and just sort of address who she is and what she's doing? We had a Zoom call with her, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, a week ago. And she has agreed to come on in several different capacities as both a clinician, but also someone who is going to be working closely with advocates to help us address this crisis in a unique and difficult way.
So Dr. Langberg is one of the foremost experts in the world on abuse within faith-based organizations. You can find her YouTube videos if you haven't already, to introduce yourself to her. She is a professor at Temple University in Eastern US. We spent about an hour, maybe an hour and a half with her recently to get her up to speed on the work that we're doing and to see if she would be willing to collaborate with AFTT with the community as far as any questions that the community can send into AFTT that we can present to her. But there's going to be a series of Zoom meetings specifically on the videos that she's already published. And then she will come on and have a Zoom meeting with the community at large to answer any questions you may have. She's been extremely generous. She basically answered our plea for help with, let me know what I can do to help your community. If anyone has specific questions or suggestions you would like for us to pose to Dr. Langberg, please email AFTT, either Natalie or Lauren or Cynthia. Hopefully soon you will see something on the agenda with her. She also used to work with the Grace organization. So she specializes in religious trauma, religious abuse, and abuse at high levels of faith leadership.
Yeah, and then I just want to return, thanks, Donna, I appreciate that. I just want to return to the conversation about how Advocates works in partnership with Fund Recovery and with Little Hooves. So if you dial 1-855, and you'll see the number, I put it in the chat. If you dial that number and press 1, it will take you directly to Fund Recovery. If you do not have insurance, if you need a referral, if you're anywhere in the world, and those two things are your need in the moment, you can access Fund Recovery. They manage their own funds. They manage survivors on their own. They have specific people that work directly with this community that's in crisis. So if you're a survivor, you can call them and access them by pushing 1. If you push 2, it takes you directly to Cynthia. and she will work with you if that's something that you're interested in. If you have questions about statute of limitations, if you want to report an allegation, if you have a question. And then 3 is sort of the umbrella of everything else. If you have a copay you can't afford for your trauma therapist, if you need a quilt or a care package, if you'd like to attend equine therapy at Little Hooves, we have all sorts of options. So it's a circular care model. So anything will bring you back to advocates. If you want to get a hold of Dr. Bolin, if you'd like to talk to Todd, if you'd like to talk to Denise or Donna. So there's lots of different options. And if we don't have the access to something, we will figure it out. That's kind of our motto at AFTT. So no problem, too big or small. Please call the number and feel whatever you're comfortable with. We've actually recently had a number of survivors from specific regions that go to meetings that have been utilizing fund recovery, and that's great. We don't have any access to those names. We don't know who they are. We don't have any conversation with them, but we do know that some people are starting to use that. So that's great. And we want to encourage that because I know a lot of different regions all over the world are being told a lot of different messages and a lot of different funding opportunities that are not trauma informed and are not helpful for survivors, especially with what's happened over the past couple of months.
Thanks, Lauren. Let's see, Donna or Dr. Bolin, do you want to talk about kind of what's been going on with the dismissal of guidelines and these types of things, the Washington workers' call, just kind of the invalidation of survivors?
Yeah, we just wanted to acknowledge the actions by the ministry and how it has completely invalidated our survivors, our advocates, professionals that have put hours into helping and trying to build out guidelines. We wanted to acknowledge that and really speak to the space that a lot of people are in currently, and call out just the need for mental health treatment and to access help if you need it, if your friends need it. People are not okay. And so we want to make sure that we are supporting those that we love, supporting our friends. So please reach out and check on people, check in with your family members, your friends. If you need help, please reach out. If you don't even know where to start in accessing mental health treatment, please reach out. We can help you walk through that process. And we want to acknowledge our survivors. They've been carrying this burden on their shoulders for the last 16 months. And that's a really long time. And so we thank you and we want to support you and love you and love people where they're at. We're walking, a lot of people are in a different journey and a different space. And so, but we wanted to call that out on this call tonight and really just highlight the need for treatment, for mental health treatment. Please do not hesitate to reach out and get help for yourself, or help your neighbor, your friend, your family member. It's important. And I can, if you have questions, please reach out. I can chat. If you want to talk personally, private chat me, we can set up a time, but we're making ourselves available.
Thanks, Dr. Bolin. Lauren, do you want to talk a little bit about the workshop coming up, what we're going to offer? Because that will help hopefully address, people can educate themselves and go through these workshops that we're going to be offering. Do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, we are offering in partnership with a New Zealand organization of 3 mental health professionals who are offering a faith-based trauma awareness workshop. So that's something that we're going to be offering, and it also ties into PTSD, all of the elements here, but also just a little bit of understanding of what it's like to support, love, or be a survivor. So I highly recommend this course, there'll be more intimate settings, so it'll be a small group of people, and I would like to offer, it'll be survivors can do it in a survivor group. You can do it with your family. You can do it, we want to make it as I don't like to use the word safe, as like sort of as many parameters as possible to have an engaging and open dialogue where people feel like they can be authentic and also don't have to reveal everything and trauma dump. So we really want to offer these seminars, and I think I've attended them a couple of different times, and I really, really admire the women who've come up with these slideshows and presentation and engaging dialogue. So I think they're very, very helpful. Donna, would you like to add anything to that?
Oh, you're muted, Donna.
I did have the opportunity to have a look at that program. Well worth anyone's time if you have a few hours to spend just to understand a little bit more how trauma impacts us in various levels. But she specifically addresses religious trauma, which I think would be super helpful for the community to understand the mental health impact of that. She's really an expert in the field. We're really lucky that she's agreed to help us out.
Yeah, it's a really good program. I think I went to one that was a couple hours long and it was fabulous. So so I want to segue from there. Dr. Boland touched on that really a lot of this work the last year and a half or so has been on the backs of survivors. I know people have been really curious about the FBI investigation and where we're at and why we're not hearing things. And so I just want to let you know, survivors, there are survivors, there are probably some on this call that filed their police reports over a year ago. And it seems like not a lot's happened on their case, but they're working really hard on their cases behind the scenes. And they're trying to dig up pictures. They're trying to get their friends or anybody who was around them at the time to tell what they remember, get people engaged. And then of course, law enforcement's working hard on making those contacts as well. But we've been asked if the FBI is going to come in and take everything apart. And so I think Deb's on tonight, but she's not feeling very well. So Todd, if you could address what's going on, how this looks, what reality is, and just acknowledge how hard it is on these survivors to go through this process.
Yeah, well, the just as far as the FBI taking the whole fellowship apart, that is not going to happen, and that's not the role of the FBI. The FBI is right now conducting, and I say this not because I have any firsthand, like the agent doesn't call me, he's not calling Deb, he calls people who have firsthand information, witnesses and are victims, and that's where they're gathering information. Cynthia, you probably have as much contact with the agent, the case agent, as anyone, just because you've got the source of the information that from time to time they might need, just like even just a direction to or a contact person that that has information. But just based on experience and the way that these type of investigations are conducted, that'll be very much subject by subject. So, for example, if there is one perpetrator in any jurisdiction where these case agents are investigating, they will present information and testimony and records to the grand jury, and they will seek an indictment. But that process takes a very long time. And what the other element that is critical in this and is absolutely a must is that the FBI are fact gatherers. They don't make prosecutorial decisions about whether the case moves forward into the grand jury process. Those decisions are made by U.S. attorneys in the jurisdictions where grand juries are active for this case. So that can often be out of the agent's hands. They can gather facts, gather information, present it to a U.S. attorney, and sometimes that case doesn't move forward for all of the legal and attorney decisions. Sometimes it's just attorney resource allocation, just like they've got other cases and they're busy and so on. So I would just caution everyone to don't look to the United States government as the ones who are going to fix the problems within the fellowship. It needs to be the people within the fellowship. There are cases that I think many people are aware of that seem to have prosecutorial merit and are moving forward, but that process can take a painfully long time because it needs to be done very carefully so that a perpetrator doesn't get off without getting convicted. So anyway, does that answer generally the question, or is there other?
Yeah, and then I was also going to talk about, so those are cases under federal jurisdiction, which there might not be that many cases under federal jurisdiction.
Right.
So then the rest of them all fall under state jurisdiction,
Right.
where most statutes of limitations historically are just crappy. They just are. And so it's going to be a case-by-case basis where you have a survivor that has a case, perp is still alive. First, you got to be under the statute of limitations. And then your case has to have enough evidence to move forward. And sometimes even with really good evidence, that's not going to happen because of what Todd was just talking about. Prosecutor decides they just don't want to do it for various reasons. So there are so many hurdles to get to an actual arrest, indictment, and prosecution.
Well, and in the statistics for the numbers of child sexual assault cases that actually and result in convictions or even plea agreements are painfully small, and it just proves the point of how difficult it is to bring these cases forward. And in many times the evidence can be historic, and so there's very little physical evidence, if you will, and sometimes it's the abuse or the assault took place between a perpetrator and an individual victim with very few witnesses or other supporting evidence. So that's what makes these cases so very difficult, and the numbers of cases that go all the way to a conviction or plea are very small. But that doesn't just because that's so, that doesn't take away from the weight of a credible allegation. And that's why we've said on these town halls so many times, but the standard of where somebody should be removed from meeting or have other things that need to be done to that person is credible allegation. It is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the legal standard in a criminal situation. So
yeah, Denise, do you have anything to add to that since you worked in the criminal justice system? If Denise is talking, she's on mute. I don't know if I can't see her.
The system went down for a minute. Now I'm back on. So I'm sorry,
Okay.
what was the question?
I was just wondering if you had anything to add to that since you worked in the criminal justice system.
I think that everything that Todd said, I certainly could echo. And the perpetrators that I worked with, often the case factors that led them to eventually being prosecuted and found guilty of a charge was because multiple people came forward. And when multiple people have been victimized by a given perpetrator, the perpetrator is never held accountable for everybody that he's ever sexually assaulted. But if multiple people come forward over time, that can even start to lend more credibility to the prosecution building a case sometimes. So there certainly were perpetrators that they just got caught maybe the first time around, but that was the first time that they did something, but that was very few and far between. The vast majority of the perpetrators have done these behaviors multiple times in their lives, if not more. And so if more people come forward with similar case factors of whatever occurred in terms of perpetrating behavior, that can lend itself eventually for more pressure, not only on the perpetrator, but also sometimes it can lend some credibility to the criminal justice system saying, you know, maybe this person got arrested historically and it didn't go anywhere, but it's building a foundation. And so all I'm trying to say is that there's multiple variables for it eventually coming to court, but there's also multiple layers to the foundation that can be built as well. And that's why originally, after we found out about Dean Brewer's situation, and when professionals did start to come together to try to present some guidelines, that's why we said that we need to go based on credible allegations, because the majority of people don't have credible allegations against them. So if you have credible allegation against you, usually where there's smoke, there's fire. And that's why we said that they may not come before the criminal justice system, and the vast majority of them within this church haven't. But that's why that we needed to use that standard to protect people. So it's kind of a two-edged sword is what I'm trying to say, double-edged sword. I hope I touched upon the question
Yeah, that was excellent.
or the
Thank
answer.
you. Yes, that was excellent. Thank you very much. And then I think we just wanted to talk about, and people can ask questions later if you have more questions about the investigations. And we already touched on this a little bit, but community mental health concerns to our clinicians.
Yeah. You know what, before we move into that, there was a question, Cynthia, can people pursue legal action in a civil court rather than a criminal?
Yes, but here's where it gets tricky. So we have a church that is not registered with the government, so you don't have an institution that you can name and sue. Lots of attorneys have looked at these cases, and so far nobody's moved forward with one because there's a complication of you could name the overseers, then you have the complication of getting to the money. It's a legal complication. There is a Uniform Unincorporated Association Act that has been enacted in 15 states. That would give you a mechanism to go after an unincorporated nonprofit association. The statutes on that law are pretty crappy too. The best one is 20 years from your 18th birthday, if you're under 18 at the time of the incident. So we're talking about child sex abuse. That's Colorado, 20 years from your 18th birthday. Hawaii is by age 26. The rest of them are between 2 and 8 years from your 18th birthday. Texas, you only have until your 18th birthday. So they're not, again, statutes make everything really difficult. So that's a way civilly against the organization, but it'd be difficult. If your perpetrator has assets, or if you were harmed on somebody else's property, you can sue individuals. I wouldn't recommend going after somebody with no assets, because that's a waste of money. But if they have assets, you can go that route.
Cynthia, the perpetrator list, can you say how many are workers?
Oh, Mo, before we get into that, 1 second, I just wanted to address two things I think we didn't really mention. So I'd like to speak to, it is convention season, and lots of survivors were molested, raped, abused, harmed, physically, sexually, emotionally on the grounds. So it is an active insult, an active re-traumatization, an active activation for survivors. And that impaired with the response by a lot of people to the documentary and the sort of shaming of survivors. I just want to address that lots and lots of survivors have reached out in crisis because of those two things going on simultaneously on top of everything else. And so if you are experiencing any of those things by your family members, by your community, please reach out for support. We're happy to get you into trauma therapy. That's not okay. It's not healthy. It's not normal. That's not unconditional love. And the betrayal also of the Wanadak region and their dismissal of the policies and guidelines is an even further cry from the lack of legislation and policy that the government has implemented. So to have no response, no care, no policies in place for survivors, again, is yet another betrayal, another layer of trauma. And it only echoes more of the decades of abuse that survivors have been through, of being excommunicated, excluded, isolated, ostracized, and dismissed by this community. So I just want to speak that out because I think a lot of people think like, oh, these things are happening and this must be great for survivors, when in actuality, the survivors are bearing the brunt yet again of all of these things, and all of these choices have an impact on the people that you love, the survivors that you love. So I ask for each of you to really check yourself. If you're not a survivor, and check your own behavior, check how your actions online, in person, and in your own community are affecting survivors. If you love or know a survivor, which I know all of you do, or you wouldn't be here, really make sure that the people around you are checking in on them and caring for them. Suicide is a very real thing. Self-harm is a very real thing in many different ways in this community, and survivors are clinically ostracized. I mean, if they were to do a study, I think there's not more of a community that ostracizes survivors more than this. So shame on Daryl Doland, and shame on, anyone who, I personally feel anyone who has a convention right now, shame on them. Survivors have been abused and harmed on your grounds, and this should not be happening. So if you want to make amends, now is the time to do it. If you want to step into forgiveness and kindness and active unconditional love, show that solidarity to a survivor. Don't show it to overseers and workers who are not being helpful.
Thanks, Lauren. And Mo, before we go to that question, since we were just talking about investigations and civil lawsuits and that type of thing, Todd, can you talk about criminal enterprise investigations?
Yeah, somebody just asked a question about that prospect in a direct message. But the federal enterprise investigations are where the FBI investigates the organization as a whole, but those cases are generally are conducted in organized crime, or the cartel, the drug cases that involve the organized Mexican cartels or Asian cartels. So I have never heard, and I'm not aware that any church organization has ever had an enterprise investigation conducted where they were the target of the investigation. And I think the hurdle that would need to be overcome is just that the contention would have to be made that the purpose of the organization was to conduct this illicit activity. And though by some people's perspective, they may feel that way, I think that would be a very difficult legal hurdle to reach. So I am not aware in either human trafficking or even the crimes against children that any enterprise investigation has been conducted. And there are specific violations that and the FBI policy or DOJ policy could have changed since I was an active agent, but I do not believe that these type of cases are even allowed to be worked in under the enterprise theory of investigation. So,
Todd, can you speak like child's language to us? Because I know for your FBI brain, that sounds all like it makes sense, but please just take it down to like more of a level. What is it
okay,
mean that they said this, that there's this enterprise investigation, you know, like what does that even mean, first of all?
Okay, an enterprise investigation would be, for example, like the Italian organized crime from New York City, like the mob. So they can open an enterprise investigation on the specific group who's doing business, and then they don't have to name specific individuals within that enterprise, if you will. It's a criminal enterprise, and their purpose of existence is to do their various, whether it's illegal drugs or prostitution or human trafficking or extortion, and all of the various schemes that organized crime uses to exist, to pay, you know, all of their people that are within that enterprise. So an enterprise investigation in this case would be that, for example, when the Catholic Church had all of their issues just some years ago, they would have had to contest, the hurdle would be to say, to open an enterprise investigation, you'd need to say that they exist for the purpose of conducting illegal activity.
Wait, Todd, what you're saying is that if they are investigating this as an enterprise, that's not a very good look, right? Let's break it down like
no, but I'm saying,
right?
yeah, but what I'm saying is I don't think they aren't. And I don't even believe that these violations in particular, the crimes against children violations, are even that an agent would be allowed to, and it's a statute, like I don't believe they are statutorily able to open a case with these type of violations at the thrust of the enterprise. So, I mean, certainly you could make the statement that this 2x2 ministry is an organization that they could probably do, but that they exist solely for the purpose of trafficking children or assaulting, that hurdle would be very difficult for any prosecutor or investigator. And I don't believe, and maybe if Deb's on, she can help me out on this, but I don't believe that it's even allowed to open an enterprise investigation where the underlying premise of the crimes committed is crimes against children or child sexual assault. So it's a complicated legal question, and some of it may change since I retired. I don't know, but I don't believe, when I was an active agent, it was organized crime, like a terror organization you could open as a criminal enterprise, that their purpose was to commit acts of terror, and that was the underlying premise of their organization. And so therefore you could open an enterprise investigation where you wouldn't have to name each individual subject, but rather just the organization as a whole, and then investigate individuals under the umbrella of the organization.
Todd, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. You are correct, Todd. There is a list, a limited list of what they call predicate offenses that must be proven that an organization has committed. Sexual assault of children is not one of those predicate offenses, or one of the crimes under which an organization can be charged. It's things like money laundering, wire fraud, mail fraud. There's a list of probably less than 50 crimes that an organization is organized for the purpose of committing, and this is not one.
Thank you, Deb. That was very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Seb.
And just Todd, one more question, or Deb, for the people that watch the documentary, the FBI agent, is that a normal thing for them to comment on something like that?
Well, that was an SAC. So he was the special agent in charge of the Omaha division. So he's one of the few people. There's a couple of people within any field office that are even allowed to talk to media. One being the SAC. So his comments are pretty unique, though. I have to say, maybe it's more common today, and Deb, you can chime in too, but than it used to be. But rarely does an FBI SAC, the special agent in charge, so he is the top special agent, supervisory special agent within the Omaha division. He's the boss, and I have not seen where SACs are speaking to the media about an active, ongoing investigation. Sometimes it happens when there are actual indictments and there's a takedown or a broad takedown, then the SACs will make public comments. Or where there's a kidnapping, you'll see the SACs sometimes if there's a big media case. But it's pretty rare, and I have not seen those types of direct comments very frequently. Deb?
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Can I jump in here with a question? Asking if the enterprise investigation is different than a RICO investigation.
Well, probably if you had an enterprise investigation open, you would be seeking a RICO statutes within. So it's a difference, I think, in that the RICO statutes or the whole RICO investigation is a DOJ. Those are specific statutory violations, and there are predicate underlying crimes that have to be a part of a RICO case. But you could have an enterprise investigation and it not necessarily be RICO. But if you had a RICO, there's probably an enterprise investigation open. So they're kind of different, but the difference is that the RICO statutes govern those cases. Though you can't open a RICO case without DOJ approval. They are very careful to not overcharge the RICO statutes. They use them in specific cases. And again, it's usually organized crime, cartel, like in the drug trafficking whole arena. I had a RICO case in a white collar crime too, but it took DOJ approval to get authority to open and to prosecute under the RICO statute. So they're as to child sexual assault, I think it would be very, and I'm not even sure whether it's one of the predicates, and because I don't have the predicate all the predicates in front of me, but I would say that it's not going to happen. So, Deb?
Yeah, it is not a predicate offense. I have researched it and it is not.
Very good.
Todd and Deb, can you speak to, I think there's going to be chatter either way. I'm already getting some DMs about the SAC commenting in the media. What does that imply? People are wondering, does it imply they want more? They don't have enough? People are going to make, they're going to make meaning out of all of this in some way or the other. So it's like, what would you say? And Cynthia, you can also speak to this too. Just like, what would you say as to the fact that they did comment on the documentary?
I would say that it means that they want people to report, and it was an effort. It is an effort to just heighten the attention and the gravity of the investigation and make sure that people don't just feel like it's not important and then their information isn't important. The key message to that is the FBI is interested in having as many people as can make a report on the tip line that's active still today.
Yeah, one of the kind of wild things that we discovered after that documentary aired was that there are people out there who had no idea any of this was going on because they've left meetings and they're just not in touch, or their family didn't tell them. So that documentary got the word out to some of those people, and so we had survivors report that heard about it for the very first time. So I think media exposure is good for the FBI in that regard, that they're going to hear from more people. And I do think also, Todd, I don't know if you'll agree or disagree with this, but they really want people to share what they know. If you have any information and this group doesn't want to talk about what they know. I mean, the people on the Zoom want to know, but there are a lot of people in the church that don't want to talk about what they know.
Well, that's proven over and over. There are still so many victims who have not been able to come forward. That's their own journey, of course, but we know numerous people who have been a victim and have not had the strength, I guess, if that's the right way to put it, to be able to even report the abuse that took place. And I think that's just a function of the fact that when there's clergy involved in abuse, it makes it especially hard, and maybe even more so within this particular organization or fellowship. It is so hard for people to come forward, and it's a big thing when people can. And I just think the FBI's message was, please report what happened to the tip line so they can get an overall picture of what's going on.
So as the FBI and the Canadian authorities, are they sharing information about cases on Canadian soil?
Well, I know they're sharing information on cases where they both have an interest in the case.
And Cynthia, too, just to add to that, maybe too, is just that there would be information passed to the RCMP from the FBI, even if the RCMP maybe doesn't act on it. I'm not making that charge again, but sometimes, like, information's getting passed. I feel very confident that where there's a Canadian citizen or a Canadian perpetrator and they reported to the FBI hotline, that information is absolutely going through the mechanisms within the FBI to pass that to the legal authorities in Canada. And that is through the FBI's LEGAT, that would be in I know there's one in Ottawa, maybe there's one out west too. I'm not sure where all the legates are in Canada, but the agents would absolutely, where the perpetrator and the victim were Canadian residents and there was no US jurisdiction, they would absolutely pass that information, even if it's not, like, we may not know or what the net result of it was, but the information is getting shared. I feel confident in that.
What about other countries, for example, South America?
Yeah, again, it's the same thing, because from the FBI's perspective, when there is a South America, a Brazilian, say, just for example, if there's a Brazilian worker and a Brazilian victim, and so everything was had no US jurisdiction whatsoever, the FBI wants to pass that information through the legat office, just to make sure, because it's a hot potato. They don't want to be accused of not doing anything. And so that they're very good. I assure people that where there is no US jurisdiction, the information on perpetrators or victims is getting shared within the legat system in the FBI.
I got a private message from someone that was interviewed today and saying that the FBI was very happy to have the information, and the perpetrator has passed away. The statute of limitations is over. But the agent and the social worker said that it was very helpful to report anything, you know.
That's a really good point, and I guess it goes back to the thing that that was shared in the very first town hall just after the FBI investigation was announced, is just don't self-filter. Just if you think you have information, just report it and let the FBI sort through what is important to their investigation and what isn't. So.
Okay, if a survivor submits a report to the FBI, what are the odds he or she will have to testify at a hearing? Just comment that fear of testifying could be a deterrent for some.
Well, the way it would work, okay, so if it's an FBI, if the first person that responds to the reporting individual is likely to be an FBI person, agent, and that's just a discussion. That's just an interview. They typically do not show up with a grand jury subpoena. And so they're just gathering information at that point. If there was ever a time when someone would need to appear before a grand jury to give sworn testimony, that would be the first step before a charging document is obtained, there will be victim advocates and help for the person who's going to have to offer that testimony. And you typically sit down with both the U.S. attorney and the agent, and you talk about what questions are going to be answered, so you're not blindsided in any way. And you can have an advocate with you during that whole process, and you'll know very much in advance. And it's not forced testimony. If somebody said, if they're a victim, if they've been they're the first-hand person that's going to offer this testimony, if they don't want to testify, almost never would a U.S. attorney force that person to offer testimony. And so I would say that it's unlikely, but if it happens, there's help. And I think Cynthia and Lauren both there's help and advocates. There's also advocates within the FBI's, that like a victim witness advocate that can help with that whole process. So there's plenty of help, and I wouldn't worry about it. I just report.
State cases too offer advocates. When you're in the system, there are victim advocates that will walk the path with you. And I mean, I tell people, because I've seen this happen a lot, a survivor comes forward, especially in trafficking cases, and they don't want to testify. The closer it gets, they just don't want to testify, and the case falls apart. But nobody's gonna make you go through a process that you're not prepared to go through. So.
Okay, back to the perp list. How many of them are workers?
Every time we run the data, it's around 40%. It's been consistent. I haven't run the data for a while. I mean, I heard about more today with workers so dead. They're dead.
We're looking for a comment about why Washington workers say they didn't like the outcome or the process of the Grace report.
Do you want me to offer my opinion?
Sure.
Well, I don't think they liked the answer. I think when Daryl said it didn't change anyone's mind, I think he thought everyone would get on the same page behind the investigation, but that was never going to happen. So, and he wouldn't stand behind the investigation. I mean, he could have, as the overseer, said, here are the results of the investigation. The survivor was found to be credible, and now we must take action. But he didn't want to do that. So I think they didn't like the answer they got, and they didn't want to stand behind it. That's my opinion.
Denise, can you speak to a little bit of that as well? Because you also worked with the Wanadak area.
Yes, my original interaction with that area was when I went to be part of the training team for the 2-day training around Labor Day last year. And my impression initially was that the overseer did appear to be invested in wanting to care for the victims and also wanting to be able to maybe stop perpetration occurring. But that has shifted over time, and we're all kind of aware. For me, I became aware of it last fall in about October, that there seemed to be a shift away from seeking professional guidance or advice or even information. And I think that shift is a reflection of the direction of those that are the top people in charge. So I think that with the report, the Grace report, the response to it was in line to that shift that's occurred, that for whatever reasons, the leaders, the people in charge, do not want accountability for perpetrators. And also they do not necessarily even want to. They've been very harsh and very, in my opinion, very harsh and very dismissive of victims. So I wasn't surprised. Like I said, I sensed that shift last October, and the current direction that they're going, especially with rejecting the guidelines that safety teams have come up with. I think that's all kind of just goes hand in hand with the response to the Grace report as well. That's my personal opinion too, like Cynthia's.
So the next topic is about registration as a church, or the lack of registration. Do you want to talk about the significance of that and why it matters? I can give a little more background to that question. The person asking is talking about the times in history when the church did register. And other countries, it's been registered in other countries for what purpose? And why is it different in the US?
I think in other countries, the government has made them register. Maybe there's more regulation. I don't really know the answer to that. I want to say, and Lauren, I don't know if you're going to remember this, but one time we were talking to somebody in another country and they said the government made us register. So I don't know. I mean, here they registered to avoid the draft, right? And then they didn't keep that up after the war. Same with
Right.
in Canada.
We got a hand up that might be addressing that. Cynthia,
Yeah, go ahead.
just unmute yourself, Michael.
Sorry, I think you just answered that. World War II, they registered in Alberta under Willis Prop for, I don't know, various reasons, whether it was economics or it came out in the trial in court. That can be researched. It came out, I forgot his name. Sorry, it's not there. When I read through the website, to tell the truth site, it's on that site. I think Sherry probably has it in her, the historian. But Willis Prop registered it for some various reasons. I don't know why, but I know in Alberta he had a couple of web registrations with the truth that came out, and people were quite upset about it. So in Canada, I know it's, I can't speak for the States. I was thinking of World War II immediately. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, you're good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If I can unmute myself. So good at this stuff.
One thing I'd like to say is we saw a huge uptick in people reaching out who were not doing well with their mental health after the guidelines in the Wanadak region were rejected. Because these are the things that give survivors hope. The fact that there are communities and people working together to create safety teams, to work on policy. This is reassurance. This makes people feel like they're being taken seriously. This helps convention owners develop guidelines. It's an extremely valuable process. And I know a lot of people that worked on the Wanadak team who put in incredibly long hours in, professional people who just simply wanted to help. It was hard on that team to see their work rejected. But what I believe is the most devastating is what it was like for survivors to realize that they were not prioritized for safety and for policy. And the amount of mental health calls we got, including those who were feeling pretty hopeless after that policy was rejected, it was pretty heartbreaking. And not just that region, but other regions that have rejected policy. I think we heard the word used from a couple of overseers that it was too corporate. But that really took the wind out of the sails of a lot of survivors. And so I think that's kind of what's driving our most current mental health crisis.
Do you know why Daryl said if they put the guidelines out there, there wouldn't be any convention at Olympia?
Well, there are probably other people on this call that can better answer that, but the owner of Olympia has been pushing for guidelines and safety measures. So I don't know if it will happen or not.
I also want to say though that, this constant like drawing a line and then not actually acting on behaviors that are, considerate of survivors is really, really, really harmful to survivors over and over and over again. And especially for survivors who have been abused on the Olympia Convention grounds, because there are lots of them. It's like, it's already harmful having it open. It's already harmful having these places open because these are, traumatic places for survivors. It's not a place someone would want to go back to as a survivor. So I just want to acknowledge that right there is a problem. Second, Daryl has done nothing, has no intention of doing anything. And that behavior has just proved the same a year ago as it does today. There's been no changes. There's been a lot of talk. There's been no actions. And again, that's disorienting, but I hope that as a community, whether you're inside or out or go to meetings, wherever you lie in your belief system, it's like, this is all very disorienting and it's also par for the course. This is how they've been for decades and decades and decades and decades. And Jennifer, I want to also address this as well. This discouraging to see the photos posted on social media of large groups of children. Like that right there is, again, for survivors, not okay. It's not appropriate. Like you are putting your children on the line here. There are still active perps going to meetings, going to conventions. So why would you do that, right? And again, it's like, why would convention happen? And people are like, well, I'm watching, I'm safe. That's not how child sex abuse works. And Dr. Bolin and Donna and Denise and Todd and Deb can all speak to that in more eloquent, and Cynthia, more eloquent ways than I can. But like, yet again, these words don't match the actions and behaviors. And so therefore we're left with people who are not actually, they don't have values. These are not people with values. And yes, I'm going there, but if you actually cared, your behaviors would line up with your words. It wouldn't just be empty words.
Lauren, that was very well stated. And that's one of the reasons why it's great that book club picked the book Predator by Anna Salter to understand the mindset of Predator and that it's not safe at all. And this book does come with a trigger warning. I don't recommend it for survivors, but those of you that want to understand why the professionals are saying zero tolerance, predators should not be in meetings, should not be at convention, gospel meeting, anywhere near children and vulnerable populations. I encourage people to read this book to understand why we are making that strong statement. Like Lauren said, many times abuse happens in the back of their car with their parents in the front seat or at the dinner table, right under the nose of parents. So when family members say, I'm watching my kids, no, that is not
I don't know
safe.
how I lost the big picture, so.
So thank you, Lauren. Very well stated.
Natalie, would you repeat the title of that book, please?
Predators by Dr. Anna Salter, and I'll put a link into the chat for the book. You can get it off of Amazon.
We don't have any new questions.
Anybody want to ask one, or anybody want to share something?
Yes,
Who's that?
Sheree. Regarding the names, the church names, I'm sorry, I couldn't get my camera to working a while ago when the question was asked. The church is not registered right now in America. It was called Christian Conventions. It is a letterhead they do use, and the same letterhead is used across the country, and they'll put the names of conventions up at the top on each side, and it will be the conventions in that area. So you'll have one for the West Coast and one for the East Coast. And on Telling the Truth, in the photo gallery, there's a section called Documents, and there's pictures of a number of those letterhead letters that have been written on them. And it was used even in World War I, vaguely, but in World War II, they registered with the government. The Selective Service is who they registered with. And that was partially because you weren't supposed to have very large gatherings, and you're supposed to register if you did have these and so forth. But it was not for conscientious objectors, because you didn't have to be associated with a particular church to do that in World War II. You did in earlier wars. In each country, the requirements are different as to registration and who what the requirements were to be a conscientious objector. So what they wrote the letter for George Walker in 1942, and Jack Carroll wrote a similar one, was to get the workers for a clergy exemption, so they did not have to go to war, even though some of them did go or have to go. But that was the main effort, that, and to let people know they were a legitimate entity. And then the Alberta registration with Willis Prop, that was disbanded after it was discovered, shortly after it was made, and big hullabaloo, it went viral, and internet was up in that time, and so it was disbanded, and he apologized, and he said that that was for the purpose of enabling one of the sister workers to stay and work in Hungary. Some people thought that wasn't really the real reason, but that's the one that was given. And then they said they no longer needed it. But that is the case for a lot of the registrations in the countries. And like in South America, for the workers to go there, they need to have the church saying that they're backing them. And they put down who's supporting them, and for the names down there, it's been interesting. There's a variation, but most all of them have the word Christian church in the name. It may be San Felipe Christian Church, or the Christian Church of so-and-so, or in so-and-so country, but they kind of stick to that there. I have kept a list of all the church names that I've heard of, and they're posted on Telling the Truth under the heading that says list. And it's got church names there, and there's a number. There's all I've ever found, and some of them that I have copies of documents using that name are in the TTT photo gallery. So they're not really a united name, you know, it's just wherever they kind of need one, they dig up one and go with it.
Hello?
Reminds me of
like I had to give a name when I published my book for my publishing company. I'm the publisher. I gave myself a name, you know, because I needed one to go on the book. I'm Clarion Call Publishing, but that's sort of like being a proprietorship. You take a name, it doesn't really mean much. You just registered at the county so nobody else can get your name and you can get a bank account. And that's about as far as it goes. Don't know if that helps anything, but
Yeah, it does. Do you think they're still using that letterhead today?
yes, I have some fairly recent letters on it. They use it like when workers go out of the work and they need references because they've got 10 years that they can't account for. They could have been in jail. And so they get the workers will write them recommendations and say that they've been a missionary and da da da. And I've got one with my Uncle Herman Bieber. It's an original that they gave to him. But
Well,
there's
that's
more.
that's so interesting because it makes it look like you're a legitimate corporation.
Yeah. They use it when they need to
To
need it
look,
for a
yeah.
business, to look
Yeah.
official. Mhm.
Dawn, did you want to say something?
Yeah.
Monty did.
Yeah, I'm Monty and she's Dawn. Anyway, I was just wondering, I listened to that Daryl Dolan when he downplayed and he put the survivors in sort of a different group. And he said this group of people needs help, and you know, he acknowledged that there's, you know, a need, and yet it's like he distanced himself from it and didn't really own it. It's like it was just this group that needs help, and you know, so I was really sad to see him backplay all that you know has been worked on. And so what I'm wondering is if a number of us, or for my own needs, just to have something I could go to my elder with and say, you know, you promise not to bring any perpetrators into the meeting, and just something fairly simple. So because like we can't help them with their problem of, you know, of not being married, or you know, like the disciples had homes and some of them had jobs, and just the different things that we see, that you know, where there's no guidelines for who can give their testimony or who can take part of the emblems. And so none of that really matters if I can't go and ask my elder if he'll sign this, just taking responsibility that I'm not going to bring myself and my children and my grandchildren into an unsafe environment to worship. And if they won't go that far, you know, maybe that's a different angle. You know, I don't know. The overseers are, I like to think some of them are maybe realizing at Elizabeth I, there was sort of an apology almost, you know, they realized that there's some that were hurt. But anyway, is that a good approach? Because you know, I'm just kind of looking down at my little little camp and to see
Yeah. I mean, whatever you can do to keep your situation as safe as you can is recommended. But you know, that apology or whatever was offered up at Elizabeth falls really short because there's an alleged perpetrator with serious allegations that the workers knew about way back 20 years ago. And he has Sunday morning meeting in his home. So, and that's
right,
that's in
exactly.
Colorado.
Right.
So that falls really short.
Right, definitely. That's what I would say. You almost got to an apology, but is there anything like that like a form that anybody else has came up with for their elders that and like if we did that in a time frame where there was just a bunch of them that went to their elders that are not supportive of survivors, that maybe they would get attention from that way, from the other side, instead of going to the overseers. That's just a thought. Oh,
I don't know if anybody else wants to share their thoughts on that.
I think Denise, Todd, or Deb can express just how predators actually work, and I think a little bit of orienting around, the verbiage versus even policies are no good without action. So I'll let the professionals take this, but I think, yeah, Denise and Todd and Deb should address this.
I would just say that, first of all, like, that's a great idea, Monty. And I think there's no reason you shouldn't do that. The one of the weaknesses of that is that elder, your elder, just or any elder of any individual meeting that would only work if the perpetrator was known. So many times, like the perpetrator is not known to the elder or to anyone else. So people, I mean, there's men, mostly men, that are just have not yet been discovered by, maybe the workers know, but maybe the elder doesn't know. So just to ask the elder to keep them out, maybe he'd be willing, or maybe he'd decide you're a disruption to the meeting and just kick you out, which is happening in other places. We know specifically people who have, just like other people, are gathering around the workers and just deciding that this particular man is, because he's speaking real testimonies about the harms that have been done, they just decide that he's a disruption in meeting. So that's the risk there is in doing that for you. But also, even the weakness of it is, what if the guy who's coming to that particular meeting just isn't known yet by people? So it wouldn't protect that. There's really no altogether way to be 100% protective, I guess, is my thought on it.
Wanted to do was to at least put it into his responsibility, so that, because I feel like there's those that know perpetrators, it's within their family, and they're too proud to admit it and to say, hey, you can't come to my meeting because they're part of their family. And so if I give that to them and put it in their responsibility and they don't want to sign it, then I can say, hey, well, that was your choice, not mine.
Well, Denise, you want to comment on that? If you're an elder of a meeting, you're not willing to remove perpetrators.
I think that this is really highlighting and underscoring those who are willing to make a stand and those who aren't willing to make a stand. Before I submitted my exit letter in March of this year, the meeting that I went to, the elder and his wife were very proactive in, first of all, seeking me out because of my background. They wanted to learn about perpetrators. They wanted to learn about safety. And also they were concerned, even to some degree, about liability. And so they were very open to sitting down and talking about all these topics. And what that particular elder decided to do was he said that if anybody was going to come to the meeting who normally wasn't in the meeting, that they would first of all have to they would have to announce themselves to him, and then he would try to ferret out whether or not this person should be coming to the meeting. And just like Todd said, I want to really underscore that there's nothing 100%, but I think it's more, every time I hear Lauren speak about community, any church is a community. And we're really seeing who's willing to make a stand and who's not. And there's multiple reasons for folks choosing not to make a stand, either on behalf of victims and or for perpetrator accountability. But if they're not willing to make a stand, then there's going to be even less accountability and bigger cracks for people to slip through. So all I know is that the elder of the meeting that I was part of, and I still genuinely care deeply about those folks, he was willing to make a stand. And he said, this is not going to happen in my home or under my roof. So I think that that's a responsibility of each elder, that they need to decide what's going to go on in their home and under their roof, and essentially for the people that they're responsible for that are meeting in their home. There is some responsibility there. And I think that's just where we see where people are going to continue to support the ministry and toe the line for the benefits of being an elder, or for the comfortableness for being an elder, and people who aren't willing to do that. I just know that when all this came to light and we started working on it, I had given a prescription that certainly could have been added to or certainly could have been built upon. And I was very open to feedback and suggestions. But essentially the prescription was anybody with credible allegations should not be in any meeting where either A, victims could be in, and or B, members of the population that they're accused of assaulting would be there, that they would need to be in a closed meeting. And that would take responsibility on the ministry's part, and that would take responsibility on the elders' part, and that would take responsibility on the congregation's part to honor those boundaries and hold people accountable. And it was a real clear-cut prescription. And people are not willing for that. And that's exactly comes full circle to what we saw in Washington. Washington and North Idaho and Alaska. People are not willing to take a stand. And the more people that are willing to take a stand, the more that the situation gets light cast upon it, and the more accountability that can be there, and the more healing and safety for victims can be there. And so I just think you probably should sit down and have a talk with the elder that you're talking about and ask him where he stands on that, about how safe does he even view his meeting to be? Because my elder was very concerned about having a safe home and a safe meeting, and I was very respectful of that.
Yeah.
Hello, Monty, I want to high five you. I really mean that. And
unfortunately, I've confronted him, and he won't want to talk about it. He just says we read the scripture. So anyway,
well, anytime you have a brilliant, fantastic, and spiritual point of view and an idea. This is one of those moments that is, as for me in my house, it's that kind of moment. As for me in my house, this we will serve the Lord. We are going to do X. So anytime that you put what can be perceived as a threat or a challenge, you need to think ahead and say, okay, this is the most negative that can happen. Okay, that in this case, be excommunicated, your reputation, etc., etc. And say, okay, with your wife and go, okay, darling, this is the deal. Do we want to do we want to move forward with this? And the perpetrators and the powers of authority are longing and hoping and in their own way praying that we'll just get weary of well-doing. We'll get weary and just eventually it'll go quiet like it has done in the past.
Right. And so that's why like I keep barking, you know.
Well, that's
predator and I bark.
Yeah.
See another predator and I just keep barking, but I want it to be on them. It's like I don't want someone going around saying, yeah, Monty left. Monty quit him. I want them to say, yeah, they quit me. You know, they don't support me, you know, because I've, you know, 4 generations and a multitude of people that are they've had enough, some of them, you know. I mean, it's just they're not saying anything, and I feel like I need to be there to until I'm excommunicated. I've definitely thought about all those things, and you're right. It's me and my household is first, and for God.
Well, then my comment back to you, Yasa, Monty, and your household is that be strong and of good courage. Go forward. Be strong and of good courage.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jester.
Thanks, Chester.
You're welcome.
Could I just mention to Monty, I'm an elder, and I would welcome somebody to come to me with a paper for me to sign. I have also talked to the other elders in our area, and one of the other elders has agreed that we have kind of a guideline of our own that we'll follow, and that we'll talk to each other and talk to a network of people that we've built up to make sure who we're bringing in or letting in to our homes is safe. So there is care, but there's also a lot of people, a lot of elders that are kind of, I think I heard you say that he said we're reading the scripture, which if he's allowing this stuff to happen and come into his home, he's not reading the scripture, sadly. So anyway, carry on, sir, and I appreciate you.
And I want to add back just one thing, and by the way, God bless you both for saying what you've said, is that we don't live individually. Even the fact that we're having this meeting shows how one life touches another. And so everything that you do touches another life positively or negatively. And what you're talking about, Monty, and
Mike.
what?
Mike.
Is you're speaking up for righteousness' sake, for the grace of God. You're speaking up for the right reasons. That will have its effect. That's God's laws. That if you do those good things happen. May not happen in a certain time period. That's his call. But it does happen. We're not working in a vacuum. So every decision can have great impact. Whether we do it in mass or not, or whether it's done one at a time, it's happening.
You have been hacked by the CCP. We are here to inform you that you must pay glory to the Chinese Communist.
فبين اقتحام يبيد الطغاة وكتيم صوت جميل صدى صليل الصوارم نشيد الأباء ودرب القتال طريق الحياة بين اقتحام يبيد الطغاة.
Thank you, whoever disabled that. One of the things that's been mentioned that's come up in my little circle is there was some mention a few minutes ago of credible allegations. And so it seems as though some some overseers aren't able to work out is. And if somebody gives a bit of feedback on how somebody could have been wiser, it seems as though some overseers are taking that as an allegation. And I asked, so what is it an allegation of? It's not an allegation of sexual abuse. So what is an allegation of? And he couldn't answer me, because actually it was just intended as feedback of where somebody could have been a little bit wiser, a little bit smarter. So that seems to be a bit of a problem.
Edward, was there a question in there?
More just an observation that some
Okay.
overseers, if they can't work out what constitutes a credible allegation versus a bit of feedback of
Yeah.
where one could be smarter, well, we're off to a bad start.
Yeah.
We actually have a question waiting. Could you share what a credible allegation is and what it means before a name is released as an alleged perpetrator?
I can tell you, and I think Deb, Todd, and Denise will back me up on this because they help me. We are so careful before we put a name out. We've crossed all of our T's and dotted our I's and make sure that we are completely comfortable that the allegation is credible. So we gather all of the information we can before we put a name out there. And so I stand behind every name I've put out so far. Does that
The number of names that they have not put out is shocking.
Deb, do you mean us because we're still working through them, or just what workers have known and not released?
No, AFTT.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
so careful about putting out a name as a with a credible allegation. If people knew the number that you don't put out, it would be shocking.
Yeah, we're really careful. And I have these amazing professionals working with me and looking at all of the information to make sure we're comfortable. I mean, I don't run everything by them. There's some where I have enough information and I go with it. But if I have any question whatsoever or want somebody else to look over it, they all take a look at it. So hopefully that answers that question.
As well, if it's okay if I just like touch on a few things that I've heard. I'm Brittany. I don't have my video on right now. So a lot of times I hear from people that have left the truth and those who still remain a lot of debacle about the context in which we provide safety for, survivors to feel like they can come forward and speak to their abuse and or how do we create safe environments for children. I recently reached out to a woman that I grew up with as a girl who had posted on social media pictures of about 35 to 40 children in northern Idaho at a convention. I'm sorry, let me take out my headphones. Maybe that'll make a difference on my audio. I apologize. Give me just a moment. Sorry. Can you guys hear me better now? I was told that you couldn't hear me well. Okay, so one of the things that I was told, which was actually kind of ironic after listening to the entire audio of Daryl's meeting with the workers, was that, oh, well, yeah, I saw that you may have been, you know, the child of a perpetrator, and I wish I would have known. I've never really known what to say. And oh, my kids are safe. Like, we walk with them to the bathroom at convention, so it's not a big deal. As well, we know survivors that have moved on and are not impacted by, you know, the fact that they were victims. And God has given them peace, and God has given them victory and grace over this situation. And I would just like to call to attention to anyone, whether you're a survivor, an ally, or a victim, that, you know, this is obviously a very significant thing. And we're looking at over 5 generations of victim survivors and their families. This is not new, right? It's being exposed as new, but this is not new behavior. So my father was a perpetrator, and he was on the Hulu series. I declined commentary, even though I was in conversation with ABC, as I don't desire to be identified as a victim, because I'm a survivor and I'm more than just my experiences in childhood. But it's vastly concerning to me that, you know, those that even remain that I cared very deeply for would paint it as a lack of peace to move on from a community that, you know, ignored my pleas for help for over a decade. And subsequently, some of them covered it up, ironically. And so, beyond that, I am a mother now, right? It's been half of my life away from the truth. And I don't ever hear anyone talking about how we teach children about safety. And we're talking about unlimited access of individuals that have no background checks and no guidelines and no willingness for guidelines into your homes, and then going to convention grounds with 250 plus individuals that you may know some of them. But you're talking about people that you don't know everything. And the statistics of perpetrators that are held accountable in the justice system is less than 3% statistically. You can walk your children to the bathroom, but what about teaching your children about consent? I mean, these perpetrators are friends, family members, elders, workers, parents, family members, you know, and no one is having conversations of how to protect and educate the children who are at highest risk and highest vulnerability, and entrusting every one of us, those who are outside and inside the truth, to keep them safe. I personally do not feel confident in someone promising me that my child is safe, right? It's my responsibility. And boundaries and consent and speaking in a language that is true about bodily autonomy, naming things for what they are, and understanding that grooming behavior legitimately takes place in front of the parents and is normalized before the predator actually, you know, assaults a child. It is normalized as play. It is normalized as hugs. As well, you know, trauma that you endure, whether you're an adult or child, is lifelong, and there is no finish line in healing. And I've heard from many survivors, myself, that, and I've also read on the forums that are online of people saying, hey, I have flashbacks. Is this normal? and they're experiencing activation. This is a crisis. And, like, be checking on one another. If you really feel like you're moved by what you're seeing, it's not a time to go and, dump explicit detail. It's a time to rise and meet survivors and educate those who may become victims and adequately give tools to others and resources for support. So information is power, right? Knowledge is power. And we're talking about like an entire region on the West Coast. They don't want guidelines in place because it takes away some of their power, right? And that information that was leaked in the audit, like in the Grace report, they were upset because it didn't go out the way they wanted it to. And if you read the 62-page investigation from Grace, it's very, very professionally done. There were a lot of people working to enact guidelines. So, what I would say to each one of you, whether you're grandparents, fourth generation, I was fourth generation, right? That's all I knew. Educate yourself, resource yourselves with professionals, trauma-informed care. Your friends and your loved ones, whether or not they're able or feel safe enough to express, have endured so much and most likely are enduring extreme flashbacks and body activation and are questioning their worth and their place in the community as some have been expelled from it or ignored or belittled or disproven or disbelieved. And you want to practice grace? Here's your call to action. You want to preach peace? Then practice, like a peaceful measure of meeting someone where they're at and providing them with resources to get safe help. These are lives at stakes and people that you love. And when we love those, like, if you want to go on a biblical reference, like, these are the children that come after you that will raise another generation of your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, and like meet them in this time of need so that the next generation doesn't have to endure this same crisis. And call to action all of those around you, because I was raised in a household that the elder was the abuser and no one held them accountable. So I hope that you all meet people with tenderness, and I hope it does invite in conversation. And this is not a time for promises. This is a time for action. It is a call to action time. And I don't know. I saw the pictures of the kids and I didn't sleep for 3 days. So, be gentle with yourselves, reach out for help, love one another gently. And if you don't know how to respond, just listen. And if you know someone who did survive, maybe check in on them. There was a Hulu expose on my father, and not one person in this entire community reached out. Not one. So, call to action.
Thank you, Brett.
Let's see. I've got a question here about resources for people struggling with trauma that's not sexual abuse or assault, things like spiritual trauma, family trauma, religious trauma. Does AFTT offer support to those people?
I'll jump in and help answer this question. So for those types, those do all the lists that you listed, Mo, it's important to find a trauma therapist. You can search for therapists that specialize in different areas. So whether it's betrayal trauma, whether it's spiritual trauma, there are therapists that specialize in these different therapies. So if you're trying to access mental health services, you can search through those different specialties to find the appropriate therapist. AFTT, we focus on survivors that need mental health treatment. I think there was a question about our fundraiser and the reason why it's $1 million fundraiser. So I wanted to put this in perspective for everyone. An average therapy the cost of therapy is about $150 to $250 an hour. And for someone that's accessing therapy for the first time, many times they need to be seen once or twice a week. So when you're looking at a therapy cost of, say, $300 a week, that's $1,200 a month. And so when you start looking at $1,200 a month and how many survivors you can treat with $1 million, you're looking at treating 1,200 survivors. We have a perpetrator list of 910 perps. We have way over 1,000 survivors from this crisis. That's just therapy. When you talk about inpatient, intensive outpatient, psych hospitalization, that cost will skyrocket. You can look at $10,000, $20,000 a month for that type of level of care. And so when we talk about $1 million, it's a lot. And we are actively fundraising, writing grants. But when you put it in perspective to the cost to treatment, it's actually not a lot of money when you look at how many survivors we need to treat or refer to treatment. And so I can speak to, I oversee a county behavioral health system of care. My budget is $160 million, and I treat 15,000 patients for that amount. And so when you put things in perspective, $1 million campaign is actually minute to what the need is for out there. So I wanted to kind of conceptualize a little bit about the cost to treatment and the reason behind our campaign is that high.
And the other thing, Dr. Bullen, I'd like to mention is that because of the work that Advocates does with the investigative piece in conjunction with survivor care, makes it so that their cases actually are accelerated, one, to know if they actually, Cynthia, you can speak about this, but the work that Cynthia does is really, really, really invaluable. If you're doing that work on your own as a survivor, it's extremely harrowing, whether civilly or criminally, it's exhausting. But to have someone walk you through that path, and also to have the ability to report to the FBI, report to the hotline, get therapy resources, you don't have to wait for victim services or to even be approved for victim services. Like, we offer that through Advocates. And so the work that we're doing, it's the survivor therapy is a necessity, as is the investigative piece, because without that, the FBI would not be investigating all of this. And that's just the truth, Cynthia. So, I'd like to just say these things go hand in hand, and the validity and care for survivors, they need both things. They might not be ready for one at the exact moment they're ready for the investigative piece, or they might just be ready for therapy and then eventually the investigative piece, but they go hand in hand. And so, $1 million is a drop in the bucket. There's been some rumors and comments on here that someone had given 37 million to the overseers and wanted act, right? And that's just so offensive and rude to survivors. Like, they spent $50,000 on a grace thing. Well, what about the survivors? It's just, again, time and time again, it's like we're putting our money where our mouth is, and we're showing up so that the resources that survivors need all around, they have access to. And Cynthia, I'd like you to speak a little bit to the cost in terms of the investigative piece. And even, I think Denise and Todd and Deb a little bit for you as well, because this is also, you understand how much it costs government wise to do something like this. And Denise, how much it costs to rehabilitate a perpetrator, but to rehabilitate a survivor and give them a lifetime of help and healing. There is no final destination for survivors. And I think that's something that we forget is like actively right now, the overseers and perpetrators inside of this community are harming future survivors, which is millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars and lives.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like the money that we know they have to go to the survivors. I still haven't given up on the idea of settlements to survivors with the ministry's money. So if somebody can make that happen, that'd be great. I don't love talking about this stuff, but I've donated about $250,000 in billable hours on this project so far. And I mean, it's, if I was billing my time out, I've saved the church a lot of money as far as investigations go to determine credible allegations and get some of the cases moving forward. But yeah, investigations are expensive. And was Denise going to talk about cost of rehabilitating? That's not the right word, but treating a perp.
Yeah.
I know what you mean, Cynthia. I don't have those figures off the top of my head. The figures that I can think of are very old. So I'd be happy to research it a little further, and then maybe we could post it on AFTT. But just the cost to incarcerate somebody without providing them treatment is very expensive, and a toll on the taxpayer and a toll on society. So, but yeah, I'm sorry I don't have those figures right now, but I can tell you that a lot of prisons have done away with treatment in general, whether it be for substance abuse or mental health or perpetrator treatment, because of the expense. So it is costly. And I agree with you. I've never even thought about adding up the hours in terms of consultation and or the trainings that I went and put on for the ministry and or the PowerPoint presentations, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's thousands of dollars. And I would just like you, I would love to see the money that the ministry has stashed away to be turned over for a huge problem that they've created, that they've had a big part in creating.
And we actually have attorneys that are willing to facilitate those settlements through their escrow accounts, their client trust accounts. So the infrastructure would be very easy to put in place if we could get the leadership to give us the money to take care of survivors.
Maybe we can talk about donations, our fundraiser. Talk about what the $1 million, our $1 million goal, what would that do and where it will go when you reach the goal, and what can people do to help?
Yeah, I'll jump in. So the $1 million fundraiser is to help pay for mental health treatment. And so we talked a little bit about the cost to treatment. And so for $1 million, it would be just $1,000 anticipated, 1,000 survivors that we can help with mental health treatment when you start breaking down the cost of mental health treatment. So our fundraiser is really focused on providing those ongoing therapies for survivors. It's also fundraising to keep AFTT sustainable. Cynthia just talked about donated hours. Well, to keep a nonprofit sustainable for many years to come, we need to start bringing on diversified revenue to bring on paid positions, especially with grants coming online and different things that need to be covered. So that's the goal for our fundraiser and what we're focusing on.
Hey Nat, just real quick, explain why, like the management of those grants. So you've got all this funding that comes in. It's not just, hey, here's the money, go do your thing. So explain, because that kind of explains the positions that need to be added.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So with grant monitoring, I put it in perspective. So I have a full-time grant team that once you get grants online, you've got statisticians and you've got grant monitoring, you've got a budget that you have to monitor. That's just monitoring the grant. That's not providing the direct service. So depending on what the grant was written for, it's bringing on the full-time employee, part-time employee that was written to that grant, bringing staff on, paying salaries, showing quality and quantity of the service that you're providing, fulfilling what you said you were going to do in a grant. And the grants that we apply for under advocates are federal grants because we provide services to survivors in multiple states. So we can't write grants but state specific because our survivors are state internationally. Unfortunately, our grants don't cover international survivors yet. We're looking at going down that route, especially because of the number of survivors we have in Canada and in other countries. And so the grant monitoring is huge. It's actually the easiest part to grants is writing it. Once you get awarded grants, the hard part then starts in monitoring and fulfilling what you said you were going to do.
And since we're talking about grants again, I'll mention the one we applied for that's either $800,000 or $1 million. I can't remember the exact amount, but that's for legal services of sex abuse and sex assault, especially female victims of those crimes. And so that would allow us, 2 attorneys signed on to that grant with us that work in child sex abuse cases. We could bring them on in every state if we got the grant, but that would allow us to pay those lawyers to move forward with some civil claims. Those lawyers that are scared to take those cases because they don't know if they can get to the money, they could take those cases on to file civil claims on behalf of survivors. It would allow for that. It would also allow for these attorneys to kind of walk the path of the criminal cases with survivors. So it's just a way to provide legal services to the survivors without them having to pay out of pocket. And it'll put the attorneys at ease because they know they're going to get paid.
Okay, one more question about donations. And Lauren, I don't know if you touched on this earlier, but there's a rumor about a donation to the church of 37 million. Do you know anything about that or if it's true? Anyone?
I've heard that. I don't know if it's true. Supposedly here in the Northwest. And that doesn't shock me. People have signed over their entire estates to the workers.
Okay, next question. If a worker reports criminal behavior of an overseer or another worker to the FBI, do you think the worker who reported will be required to testify at any point? Need me to repeat that?
Yeah, please.
If a worker reports criminal behavior of an overseer or other worker to the FBI, do you think the worker who reported will be required to testify at any point?
Well, I would say that if what the worker reported results in the like the potential of a charge that the FBI is going to investigate, the step would be just a thorough interview that would be conducted by the FBI, of course, like I think I said earlier. But then at some point, it could be that they would be called to testify first in front of the grand jury, and then after they're charged, they could potentially need to testify in a criminal trial if it ever got to that point. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about that unless the worker that was reporting was directly the victim of the crime that they were reporting to the FBI. So if they're just have witness information, the likelihood is not very great that they would have to testify to that unless it was because of the hearsay rules of criminal procedure. So I would think that it's a very small chance unless the worker reporting is the actual victim, then that's different.
Or a witness to the crime.
Or a direct witness to the crime, yeah. Which we know that could be, I can think of one case where that could have happened, so.
So fear of retaliation by the overseers may keep some from reporting what they know. If a worker is a whistleblower regarding abuse, will there be any type of protection?
And it's my understanding that the whistleblower statutes, the Whistleblower Act protects government employees that report so they don't suffer retribution for reporting against if a worker reports and they are then dismissed from the work, there's likely no not that I'm aware of that I think it speaks to if that were to happen, it would speak to the particular overseer that made that dismissal, but I don't think there's protection, not that I'm aware of anyway.
My experience was that I was dismissed from the work for bringing a case to the overseer. Probably now they would be a bit more cautious about dismissing somebody, but I was told that I would have to consider the victim a liar. And when I said I couldn't do that, I knew that what she was saying was true. Then I was given the ultimatum, either you agree that she's a liar or we dismiss you from the work. And so I chose dismissal. And there was no recourse. Maybe now we'd have a bit more of a voice to object to it. But 10 years ago, I was dismissed and that was it. There was no recourse whatsoever.
Wow.
I wonder if I can say, this is Shannon Becker. I was wondering if I can say something in regards to the work. Is that okay, Cynthia and everybody?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So I am a survivor by my own father as well. And I keep a low profile on these kind of Zooms, but some of you do know me. I also was in the work of having 12 years in the work. I don't have my camera on because I've already got my 90s on. So anyway, but I have been out of meetings for a year and a half now. But I just want to say that to anybody who wants to, I appreciate everybody trying who's still in, so to speak, and I don't like those words in and out necessarily, but trying to be change, advocate for change, and all of with the workers and with doing everything you can to help. I appreciate that coming from the aspect of having been in the work and having been a survivor, but my experience with the overseers and with many other workers is they don't want to really change unless it's going to benefit them. And they really don't understand what it really means to be accountable, even in small things. And I have said to a friend of mine about 6 months ago, they were telling about a conversation. They were in a home. This is someone in the work, has been in the work for many years. They said they were having a conversation with someone and they couldn't understand why they were being asked the questions they were. And I said, well, that's because you're on two totally different planets. The workers is a system within a system, and they are very secretive. Three of us young workers, I was in my 20s at the time, three of us young sister workers, we used to joke with each other. We could write a book, but nobody would believe us. Well, as one of them, we talk now, she says they'd believe us now. Well, you might believe about 1/10 of it, but I mean, so even current workers, there are overseers with so much information, and they are covering up, and I do have firsthand knowledge of some of that, and even recent states. And so I'm not, when I speak about things, I do have facts to back it up from my personal experience with those particular people, as well as what I have survived levels. And so I just don't, I understand wanting to give people the benefit of the doubt, like workers. It is hard to think that they may not be telling you the truth. I get that. But my own father, who was my abuser, one of my abusers, had many, many people fooled. I have people to this day that don't think I'm telling the truth. I had a conversation this last week of someone who doesn't believe the majority of us survivors. And that is a very hard thing to take, because even just life in the work, and in my experience and what I have been through in leaving the work and leaving the church, it is very mind-boggling how the lack of compassion on every level, and the lack of taking responsibility and accountability, even for a very small percentage. So just because an overseer wants to put something out there, or their little sidekick, of they're taking these precautions, no, conventions have not been safe for years and years and years, and they have known about it. And so and there are very few, I wouldn't know what the percentage is, but I'm going to tell you, very few workers in the work that are not aware of something somehow. But the majority of the younger ones don't know a whole lot. If anything, you probably know something is going on, but you don't know what. Like I myself, I stayed in Steve and Wendy Rowe's home, and I had no idea, and I was a survivor. Had I known, I would have hit the roof. Just saying. But so just be very leery and question what you were being told. Just question it. If it doesn't line up to what you may think or feel in your heart, maybe that's God telling you, question it. So I'm just saying, don't trust just because it comes from a worker or it comes from an overseer that it's of truth. In one of my cases alone, with one of my coworkers, that this is many people on that staff that person is on today, 95% of that staff is well aware of why I left the work one of the times. They're well aware, the overseer is, everybody, but in their own guidelines are saying they wouldn't put up with it, but they are currently today. So I could go on for hours, but I will shut up. So, but yeah, just be careful, people, really be careful.
Thank you so much, Shannon.
We don't have any more questions waiting in the queue.
Okay. I think we're at 2.5 hours, so I think that's probably enough for this evening. unless anybody has a burning question that they want answered real quickly. All
I could
right.
just add to what Shannon just
Sure.
said. It came clear to me a while ago that a serial abuser, by definition, is a good manipulator. Otherwise, he wouldn't have got away with doing what he did. And also, workers tend to be fairly gullible because just lack experience. And so when you get a good manipulator and a gullible worker who's sure that the wool can't be pulled over his eyes, then you've got a pretty serious combination there. They're pretty likely to fall victim to abusers' lies and manipulation, that they don't believe the stories against them, the true stories against them.
It's a really, really good point, Edward. And for some reason, I mean, I've seen correspondence actually between workers talking about a perpetrator, and I've received some of those letters from workers, but they're so perp centric. I'm not sure I'll ever understand it, but they are so perp centric instead of caring for survivors. So
I think a lot of it has to do with the perps that we've been taught about them grooming the gatekeepers, and I think they deliberately go out on a charm offensive with especially the senior workers, so that if anything comes out, that they will side with the people that they've known for years and have been on a charm offensive with them. They've stacked the deck in their favor long before anything becomes known.
Could be. Could be. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you all.